Hi, my name is Peter Bringy, pastor at Covenant Family Church. Last Sunday, we talked a little bit about the second commandment and some of its implications, part of the 10 Commandments given on Mount Sinai. The first commandment talks about how we are to worship no other God except the one true God, the one described in the beginning of the 10 Commandments, the one who delivered us from bondage, who is the Lord and our Lord, who has saved us. We ought to worship none but Him. The second commandment has a distinct idea from that. Not only are we to only worship the true God, but we also ought to worship the true God in the right way. That we ought not to be like the Israelites, who both in the wilderness as well as later on in its history when the kingdoms divided, and they set up golden calves to worship the true God through this image. And that is what is being forbidden in the second commandment when it says you shouldn't make a carven image or a likeness of anything and bow down to it or serve it, to worship it, that is. That we are not to worship God by the use of images, using images as an object of worship. This is both in heart and mind. We ought not to give worship to the image, and external gestures are also forbidden. Bowing to images is forbidden. Bowing, which even is fitting in the Bible to bow to a king, bow to living people who have authority in our lives, not giving them worship as divine worship, but using an external gesture. That same gesture is forbidden to images, that we are not to bow down to them. And so this forbids certain practices by some groups like the Roman Catholic Church or Eastern Orthodox Church, even though they'll say they're giving them simply veneration. But the commandment also forbids the action of bowing. Now, why is this a big deal? Why are images a big deal? Well, it has to do with how we think about God and how we interact with God. There's a strong polemic in the Bible, for example, in Psalm 135, that contrasts the true and living God, who is active, who sees, who hears, who interacts with his people, and an image which is inanimate. It doesn't see, it doesn't hear, it can't do anything. Rather, we just talk to it, we think about it, it's passive, and we ought not to think of God like that. And think about it, most of the time we have images of people who are either away or not near us, or perhaps have died. But if someone is living, we usually direct ourselves to them. We don't look at a picture of them and talk to the picture while they're standing right there. The same with God. He is omnipresent, He can hear us, and we can interact directly with Him, and ought not to reduce Him to an image and interact with Him by means of that image. Now, does this commandment forbid all visual art? No. In the context, we see that the intent is to forbid its use in worship. It's also seen in the book of Exodus that art is used to decorate the tabernacle. God even commands that. We see elsewhere it's used in Solomon's palace. He has sculpture of lions next to his throne. Art is a good thing. It just should not be perverted to distort our idea of God and to distort the worship that He has instituted. He is the one who determines what He is pleased with, how His name and honor ought to be reverenced, and how His people ought to proclaim His praise and to have communion with Him. And He has described that in His Word. So let's keep His ordinances pure, unmixed, and entire, and let us enjoy communion with the true and living God.